14 أذار حتى نحقق الحرية التي ننشدها جميعا.
Good afternoon. It is Monday, March 25th. I'm Yuna Naufal, and these are today's headlines. The Lebanese army boosts its presence in Arsel after a series of tit-for-tat kidnappings in the area over the weekend. Prime Minister Najib Mikati meets with Police Chief Magistral General Ashraf Rifi and encourages discussion on measures for success of future cabinet meetings. And a blast in eastern Syria hits the Free Syrian Army commander Riyad al-Assad, causing him to lose a leg. President Michel Sleiman is heading to Doha to take part in an Arab League summit during which he will put forward his country's stances on developments both at home and in the region. Reporters say Sleiman's speech will emphasize Lebanon's commitment to its policy of dissociation from events in Syria in line with the Babda Declaration. The Daily Star says Sleiman will also stress on the need for a settlement to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict based on the Madrid Peace Conference and relevant international resolutions. Sources added the Lebanese president will likely discuss the fear of deterioration in Lebanon, given the recent resignation of the government and the failure to agree on a new electoral law. Prime Minister Najib Mikati says his resignation opened way for discussion on holding a national dialogue. Mikati and Police Chief Magistral General Ashraf Rifi discussed the ongoing tense security situation in the country. During the talks, Mikati urged officials to discuss ways to provide incentives for the success of the upcoming cabinet. He said his decision to resign was to avoid being accused of escaping his responsibilities after the government referred the public sector's wage scale to Parliament for approval. The Prime Minister stepped down on Friday amid a political deadlock between the March 8 and 14 alliances and discords within his own government on the formation of the authority which would supervise the upcoming elections. Grand Mufti Sheikh Mohammed Rashid Kabani has filed a lawsuit against the suspects involved in the attack on two sheikh in Khandak al-Khami last week. Kabani said the purpose behind the lawsuit is not revenge but the creation of a deterrence against all those who plot for strife. The Mufti said he sought to protect Lebanon from internal and external plots against it. He requested to refer the case to the Supreme Judicial Council given the danger of crimes committed against state security in an attempt to stir strife among different confessions. This comes after prosecutor Judge Hatem Mahdi ordered the arrest of 7 people suspected of involvement in attacks on 4 Sunni sheikhs in Beirut last week. The Lebanese army has boosted its presence in the northeast of the country after a series of tit-for-tat kidnappings in the area over the weekend. Security sources said an armed group kidnapped Hussein Kamel Jafar, who is 37 years old, near Khirbat Daoud in Arsel, northeast of Lebanon. The act prompted the Jafar clan to kidnap residents from the area in retaliation. The sources said at least 9 residents from Arsel were abducted in separate incidents along the international highway between Baalbek and Hirmel. Earlier on, clan members opened fire on an ambulance transporting wounded members of the Free Syrian Army from the border town of Arsel. The ambulance driver, who had been snatched, is now released. 1 paramedic was wounded during the attack as well. Tripoli residents actively reject the rounds of violence which often break out in the city, including last week's clashes. Residents are mobilizing to express their demands for an arms-free city through talks and social gatherings and Facebook groups. They have moved from protesting against the violent episodes at Tripoli's government Sarai to making outright demands for stability and security in the city. Officials from the city's Chamber of Commerce and representatives from trade unions, scholars, and social activists formed the Civil Council of Tripoli to jointly express their views, rejecting violence and the deteriorating security. The corpse of a Syrian national who disappeared 3 days ago was found inside a cave at Al-Rawshi Rock in Beirut. The national news agency reports that Ahmad Omar al-Nadir, who was 34 years old, fell into the sea after slipping off Al-Rawshi Rock while he was taking photographs of the area. He consequently drowned, and his body was found by a civil defense team inside a nearby cave. The commander of the rebel Free Syrian Army, Riyad Assad, was injured overnight in a blast that hit his car in eastern Syria. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the blast, which caused Assad to lose his leg, occurred near his car as he was driving in the town of Mayadin. One of Assad's relatives said he had been transferred to Turkey for treatment after the blast. Assad was one of the first officers to defect from the Syrian state military and to join rebel forces back in 2011. And Syria's resigned opposition chief Ahmed Muaz al-Khatib says he will make a speech in the name of the Syrian people at the Arab Summit in Doha. The opposition's envoy to Qatar, Nizar al-Haraki, told reporters that Khatib, who resigned on Sunday as head of the national coalition, would head the Syrian opposition delegation and represent the country, which has been suspended from the league. The delegation will also include Syria's interim prime minister, Ghassan Hito, and reports say Khatib accused certain countries, notably Qatar, of wanting to control the opposition and of imposing Hito. Haraki noted that Khatib's resignation has not been accepted yet and insists he will still be the coalition chief. Moscow insists that Russian and Chinese representatives join a United Nations investigation into allegations that chemical weapons were used in Syria last week, according to a senior Russian diplomat. Well, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon announced the inquiry and made it clear it would focus on a rocket attack that killed 26 people near Aleppo. Syria's government and opponents accused each other of firing a missile laden with chemicals. Russian Foreign Minister Gennady Gatilov said the investigation could only be objective if it is conducted by a balanced group of international experts. Ban's announcement followed a dispute between Russia and Western Council members over the scope of the investigation. Coming up next, New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg and the CEO for the National Rifle Association debate gun control. More after we return. Welcome back. Israeli President Shimon Peres says that an apology by Israel to Turkey over death caused by a raid on the Gaza-bound flotilla had ended a misunderstanding. His statement comes after Israel has apologized formally for the 9 deaths aboard the Turkish vessel Mavi Marmara. Israeli Marines had intercepted the flotilla carrying activists who challenged Israel's naval blockade of the Palestinian-run Gaza Strip. However, Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Israel has to deliver on its promises before relations between the two countries can return to normal.
Well, it was very much in the air and on the agenda. I think somehow both countries wanted to put an end to this misunderstanding and return to the good relations that have existed between Turkey and ourselves for many good years. Generally, I can think about 1,000 reasons why Turkey and Israel should be friends. I cannot find one reason why they shouldn't be friends of the future. And they represent the future. Once the Middle East will be free from threat of destruction, there won't be any need for nuclear weapons. Israel is a country which is being threatened to be destroyed. Turkey is a country that nobody is threatening here. And Israel said we shall not be the first to introduce nuclear weapons to the Middle East. And that remains our position.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has arrived in Kabul on an unannounced visit and will hold talks with the Afghani President Hamid Karzai. They are expected to discuss issues including reconciliation talks with insurgent groups and the transfer of security responsibility to Afghani forces as foreign troops prepare to leave. During a visit to Baghdad earlier this week, Kerry urged the Iraqi Prime Minister to stop Iranian flights flying over Iraq from carrying weapons to the Assad regime in Syria. Take a look.
And I made it very clear that for those of us who are engaged in an effort to see President Assad step down and to see a democratic process take hold with a transitional government according to the Geneva Communique, for those of us engaged in that effort, anything that supports President Assad is problematic. And I made it very clear to the Prime Minister that the overflights from Iran are in fact helping to sustain President Assad and his regime. So we agreed to try to provide more information with respect to this, but I also made it clear to him that there are members of Congress and people in America who increasingly are watching what Iraq is doing and wondering how it is that a partner in the efforts for democracy and a partner for whom Americans feel they have tried so hard to be helpful, how that country can be in fact doing something that makes it more difficult to achieve our common goals, the goal expressed by the Prime Minister with respect to Syria and President Assad.
Russian and Chinese defense ministers meet in Moscow, vowing to promote bilateral military exchanges and cooperation to a higher level. The consensuses reached by the heads of the two states have provided guidelines to the development of bilateral ties, including military cooperation. Russian Defense Minister General Sergei Shoigu said during the meeting that Russia attaches great importance to bilateral cooperation in the military field and thinks highly of previous results achieved through exchanges between the two countries' forces. Another in Greece, Cyprus Foreign Minister Ioannis Kassoulidis said an agreement with EU leaders was the only choice the country could take, even if there was not a lot of contentment with the decision. The foreign minister said the country would work to implement the program responsibly, but admitted the Cypriot public was bitter. Kassoulidis was speaking during a ceremony to commemorate Greece's Independence Day at the Orthodox Cathedral in Nicosia. And South Korean and U.S. military leaders have signed a new joint operational plan which would allow U.S. troops to take part in action against North Korea. The country's defense minister said the military agreement was signed between South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Jung Sung-jo and the commander of the U.S. forces in South Korea, James Thurman. The combined counter-provocation plan went into effect immediately after the signing amid rising tension on the peninsula. New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg and the National Rifle Association Vice President and CEO Wayne LaPierre debated gun control on NBC's Meet the Press. Bloomberg, a staunch advocate of tougher gun control laws, will bankroll a $12 million national advertising campaign aimed at key members in the U.S. Senate. The commercials to be run by mayors against illegal guns feature a hunter with a rifle vowing to protect the right to bear arms and voicing support for comprehensive background checks so criminals and the dangerously mentally ill can't buy guns. The advertising campaign will run in 13 states to target specific members of the U.S. Senate during the upcoming congressional recess, according to the organization of which Bloomberg is a chairman. The Senate is set to begin consideration of gun legislation when Congress returns from its Easter recess in the second week of April.
I think I have a responsibility, and I think you and all of your viewers have responsibilities to try to make this country safer for our families and for each other. And if I can do that by spending some money and taking the NRA from being the only voice to being one of the voices so the public can really understand the issues, then I think my money would be well spent, and I think I have an obligation to do that.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Let me remind you of the top stories. The Lebanese army boosts its presence in Al Sail after a series of tit-for-tat kidnappings in the area over the weekend. Prime Minister Najib Mikati meets with Police Chief General Ashraf Rifi and encourages discussion on measures for success of future cabinets. And a blast in eastern Syria hits the Free Syrian Army commander Riyad al-Assad, causing him to lose his leg. Those are your Monday headlines live on Future Television. In Beirut, I'm Yumna Naufal, wishing you a good day.
14 أذار حتى نحقق الحرية التي ننشدها جميعا.